There we go. And with that, hello everybody. Welcome in. Today I have a special guest with me today, going over, honestly, probably one of my favorite things in Eve. We're going over Gooniversity. And if you've been here before, you know that this is a soft spot in my heart, and I always tell people, go and look at this. Go and look at this. This is a thing. But we're gonna go look at the history in that. So I have the wonderful Ranger Gamma with me today. Um, Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. We've got some interesting history on a corp that is really a group uh, within the Imperium that's existed for about 10 years now. So it comes back. So the Gooniversity corp itself is not something that anybody really joins. It's not a member corp. It's
Yeah.
kind of a repository of ISK and handouts for skill books and ships and all those kind of fun pieces. But the group University dates back to it's about 10 years now. It's we're coming up on that kind of line. I'm trying to remember. It's been so long. We're either just below or just above the 10-year line because it was 2015, 2016, something like that. We were still
Oh
living
goodness.
in Deck up in the north at the time.
Well, it sounds like I might have a party to plan. Is what it sounds like. Um, but kind of from the start, Gooniversity isn't the original name. Where did the original name and Gooniversity come from?
So that's an interesting question, kind of primer to it. So Gooniversity is the original name of the system that we know today, where we're teaching classes. The old version, the predecessor group to it, was called Little Bees, and there were no real classes as we know of them today. The system for it was more like a peer-to-peer mentoring system, and so what
Ooh.
you would do is you would sign up either as a new player who was called a little b, or you would be an experienced player who was called a big B. And you were basically just matched. The little Bs would post a thread, and then the big Bs would go in and more or less just say mine. They would just this is now my person,
Mm-hmm.
and you would mentor them in whatever that would be. I'll admit most of it was things like industry and ratting and mining. There was a little bit of combat stuff, exploration. There was also that aspect to it, but
Mm-hmm.
mostly it was industry and mining and ratting and research and all those kinds of things that we most people put into the realm of production and those kind of pieces. But it was the original member for classes as we would think of, and this existed during the time of Little Bees, was run by a guy named Sirhan, and it was the original WTF 101, which stands for exactly what you think it does, because we were very not clever at that point in time.
I mean,
And
it's still.
so he would run that class. Yeah, it was like how to join a fleet, how to get on Mumble, how to uh, what do the gate
Yep.
commands mean? What does it mean when it says, do
Mm-hmm.
this, and to do this piece, go through a stargate, go through a jump bridge. To do all of those kind of pieces, he would do that. I've been on the class myself as a big B. I would sit there. I can't remember what I was doing with him. Maybe in a saber or something like that. We were dropping bubbles to show them what it looks like. It was something
Yeah.
ridiculous like that. Um, but I got involved with it I was recruited in the classic goon sense of a guy named Ted McManfist, who the second keep star in 1DQ and in ULX now is named after. We Most of us called him Space Dad. He was a high level guy in Theta, and his avatar on the forums was the dad from that 70s show. So we all called him
Oh
Space Dad.
gosh.
But yeah, that's where that comes from. A guy named Ted
Mm-hmm.
McMahon-Fist, which is where the name of the McMahon-Fist Keepstar comes from. It's named after
Yes.
him. and he, in that classic goon sense of recruited me where I had said something on comms somewhere. I don't even know how he found out, but he did. And he said, "Oh, good, you make a class about that." I'm like, okay." And that began what we called at that time the WTF 102, which was on a D-scanning class. So Sirhan did
Yeah.
the initial 101 class, getting everybody into it, and this is before Gooniversity. Gooniversity didn't exist then. This is still kind of a little bees thing. And it was just how to move around our space. The class that I created then, which we subsequently called 102, all those numbers got renamed a few years ago when Gooniversity did a big classes update. So uh, that's not what it's called now, but it's called 102 at the time. Was on just D-scanning, and we did it as like a combat intro class I was running with another guy named Vuyan, who we did a brawl at the end of this class. We would do a D-scan class, and then we got everybody together, and we just did a free-for-all brawl with
Mm-hmm.
handout frigates. We would just give people frigates, and that's how we would end that class. And whoever was, the last man standing, whoever it was, got a prize. I honestly don't remember what our first prize was, but we actually were giving away capital ships at one point in time. We would ask them, okay, what kind of thing do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And if they said, well, I like to fly Logi, we gave them a fax because
Oh
faxes had been
wow.
introduced at that point in time. Originally, they were not right. There were no faxes
Mm-hmm.
when we first started doing this. They were triage carriers,
Yeah.
but they came in later, and so we just gave them a fax. We would say, "Hey, you fly Logi, we'll give you a fax." Uh, I like to fly DPS. Okay, here's a dreadnought. I like to be a fleet support, but not a Logi person. It's like, okay, here's a carrier. Because carriers were an indirect system. They could still use drones back then. They can't now, right? That was changed years ago, but they could actually use drones. This was during the triage era where you would have your drone layout on a carrier. I actually mentioned this in one of my history classes one day that there's about 200 drones that you had to have in your carrier. You'd have Logi drones, you would have shield and armor, you would have sentry drones, you'd have light, medium, and heavy combat drones. Just so many, just ungodly amount of drones. I remember when I got my first carrier, I was just like, "You got to be kidding me!" Uh, if I recall right, the drones almost cost more than the hull did because there were so many of them. I'm
What?
sure that's an exaggeration, but it felt like it at the time.
That is
But
so.
back to the little bees. Yeah, it was a peer-to-peer mentoring is what that was, and it
Mm-hmm.
rapidly became clear that it it wasn't really working, that we had grown too big for it. It just wasn't working in that sense. There wasn't enough big bees for all the little bees. I think I had 5 or 6 or maybe 7 little bees at one point in time, trying to keep track of, here we're gonna train you on this, we're gonna do this piece, we're gonna run through all of these. Wasn't really it just wasn't practical, and a lot of us were kinda starting to burn out on it. This is also about the time that Karma Fleet came and joined Goonswarm. The Imperium was another piece, right? It was originally called Deco. It became known as the CFC. Then it became the Imperium. That's the name that we've had now for, again, about 10 years. The whole piece, Karma Fleet joined us. We got a couple of people that, for those who are in Goonswarm, obviously know who Mergelchin is. He's the CEO of Karma Fleet. He came to us from Brave. It was an interesting story. I was in GSF at the time. I was in a corporation called WeDot back then, and the head of, well, the chief of staff, right, and the head of CD, all of the really high level people came and said, "Okay, all of you bastards, you be nice to these new people," because we weren't super thrilled with Karma Fleet. We're like, "Who are these kids? What is this?" And the leadership at the time had to spend a pretty good amount of political capital just among GSF because they literally there's a forum post from Scion that says something along the lines of "You bastards be nice to these new people or else." And it came from Scion, Scion Kumatomo, and they moved into the area that most was called the Pentagoon. This is in
Mm-hmm.
deck. It's 5 systems that literally look like a pentagon if you look at the Dotland maps towards the west side of deck. That's where Comerfleet was based at the time. My corporation was based one jump out of the Pentagon. We were right there. I used to do all that with them. But one of the people who came with Merc was a guy named Marconius Porkbutt, and he, along with another guy named World Shatter, were the two kind of really original founding people of the what became Gooniversity, right? They
Mm-hmm.
transitioned from the Little Bees, Big Bees system. Ted was active at the same time. It was really the 3 of them, and it became Gooniversity. Ted really didn't stick around as doing things with Gooniversity. He was big with Theta. He had not space retired at that point in time. It was really World Shatter and Marconius who were big in Gooniversity. And we started making classes. We started doing more of those pieces. The first real like reorganization of it, I suppose you could say. Uh, Marconius wasn't really active at that point in time. World Chatter wasn't super active. Either we're moving into about 2017 or so here, 2018. We get Robbie to take over. Um, and he was the dean for quite some time. I ended up being elevated to chair of classes. In so because it's the university, it's got a university feel. We have the dean who is the head. For a normal SIG or group, they would be called a director.
Mm-hmm.
Myself, I was chair of classes. Normally, that would be classified as a sub director. Then we also had the handout programs, which is run by a guy named Hoff. And so he did the free frigate program. We had 2 free ship hull programs at the time. Um, it's frigates now. They originally were cruisers. Um, they were known as the FYF fleet, which literally stood for "fuck you" fleet. They were jammers, Nosses, Newts, all those kind of things. Celestis, hulls, Molluses, all those kind of pieces, but they were all cruisers. Well, the cruisers became just a little too expensive and too difficult to run for newbies, and so they were transitioned to the frigates that we use today. We had tackle frigates and everything like that also at the time, but the original FYF fleet, which we still call it that, we still call it the FYF fleet, but they were cruiser hulls. They're all frigate hulls today using, um, sensor dampeners, target painters. The Vigil falls into that category that you hear people do. Um, Target disruptors.
Yep.
There was only one target disruptor back at the time. There were turret disruptors. You couldn't actually disrupt missiles back then. You can now. There are missile disruption systems, but back then they were all turrets. Uh, which was interesting because the flavor of ship that was primarily used by all the null blocks back then was Drakes, and so you couldn't use tracking disruptors because they didn't affect missiles.
Mm-hmm.
CCP made a whole bunch of changes over the years to address that. Um, but today, when you go through and you hear bitter vets talk about FC, can I bring by Drake? That comes from this period of time. It's a little bit before that. It's 2013, 14, 15. All the null blocks used Drakes. It was really dull because you would just get on grid and it's just missiles flying everywhere,
Oh
all from
gosh.
Drakes, and you were just smashing Drake fleets left and right. So that phrase, FC, can I bring my Drake, comes from that point in time.
That is awesome.
As Yeah, as chair of classes, again, this was been 2017, 2018, somewhere in that neighborhood. I wrote, so Sirhan did the WTF 101 class, and he did that class for many, many years. He was doing that before I joined Little Bees. He did that after I was chair of classes for years, pretty much up until we call it Vietnam. Most of the rest of the game calls it World War B. So up until about 2020, 21, I hate that, 2020, 2021, in that neighborhood with that war, Sirhan ran the 101 class, and he was effectively the only person who ever ran that class. Nobody else ever did it. It's just him. The next 10 classes or so in Gooniversity, I wrote myself. There was one class that was written by Elvalar, which was a mining class. So he wrote the class and he gave it to me, and I edited it and cleaned it up a little bit. Um, and I think that was 108 or 109. I don't remember which phrase it was now, but I wrote basically the next 10 classes for it, and I would run those. And we had one guy. The 102 class was a D-scan class. The 103 class was on combat probing. And so we would just give people a ship and say, here's some combat probes. I'd link fits and say, if you want to bring your own fit, this is what it needs to have. I would hand them out. And we had one guy who, what's a polite way to say this? He was a dick. Yeah, he was just a dick in the system and got mad at me for running a class in there. This was the D-scan class. And he's like, you all are in my way. And we're like, okay. So I pinged the combat probing class and came back with about 30 people, and we dropped combat probes through the entire system. I spent an hour in there with combat probes while he was trying to rat. And I wasn't even chair of classes back then. I was just an instructor, what we would call an instructor. And everybody in the command team thought it was hilarious. I'm sure he complained. I don't know who he was. I don't fucking care. Everybody in the command team thought it was hilarious. But yeah, I came back. I've waited until I saw him online and pinged the fleet. All right, I had Cord do it. And then I brought 20 or 30 people, and we just dropped combat probes in his system. So if any newt came in, he couldn't tell if they were trying to probe him down or not, because D-scan won't tell you who owns the probe. You have to be on grid to see who owns the probe. You can just see that they're combat probes. Yeah, so we dropped I think it really was 20 people. So 8 probes at the time. The formations that are used now didn't really exist, but most people used 8 probes for it. So 150 to 200 probes on his D-scan. He wasn't hard to find either. I think he was in a battleship or something like that.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, he kind of hacked me off that day, so I'm like, all right, well, I don't care about you anymore. So, about a year or so after that, so during this incident, this is when Marconius was still in, World Shadow was still in, Ted was still active in it. Robbie hadn't taken over yet. He took over about a year or so after the incident I just described to you. And we basically ran it that way. There was Robbie as the dean of Gooniversity, myself chair of classes. Hoff was chair of handouts. He primarily did the free frigates piece, but he also ended up doing a little bit of the skill books. I did some of the skill books. Robbie did some of the skill books. We kind of all did that. It was just a thread that you would post in, and you would go in, whichever one of us happened to be around and have time, and go, oh, okay, let's check the skill book thread. And you would post in it. It's like, Rose, for you would say, Rose, you would have your name, and it's like, this is where we're going to send the skill book to, and then one of us would reply to it. It's like, done. Done. That's how we would do it. So we all kind of did that. It technically was on a couple of people's official plate to it, but it was such an easy thing that it was just whichever one of us did it. It was setting up the skill book packs that was kind of a pain, because they had dozens of skills in them. I don't even remember how many it was now, but
They still are.
It was many. Yeah, it was quite a number of them. Back in the day too, there was a little cheat that you could use with a can setup. You could actually create a fit inside Pyfa, and you could put the skill books into Pyfa, and then you could import that, but you had to edit the file manually. I had to do this a couple of times for some of the stuff that I would do. You could actually edit a file with it just using Notepad. You could open it in Notepad, and you could edit because it's a plain text file, and you could import that into Eve, and you could create skillbook packs from that. And then CCP did something and broke it years ago.
Oh man.
So it was one of those kind of an issues. We used to be able to do that. I have to admit, I have not tried. I haven't had to make a skillbook pack in quite some time. I don't know how the guys do it now. But for a while, you had to do it manually. You had to just literally drag each
Yep.
skill book into it.
As far as
But at
I
one
know,
point, you
it's
actually could do that.
as far as I know, it's still the drag and drop method. From yeah, it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah, you used to be able to do that with a. Um, you could do it with a can, with like almost like a jet can or like a station warehouse can. You could do it that way, but you had to edit the file a specific way. I used to do it with Iterons. I would assemble an Iteron Mark One. They're not called that anymore. They got renamed, but back in the day, there were 5 Iterons. Iteron Mark 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The Iteron 5 still exists. The other ones called like the Cryos and the Nereus and all those. Those were the Iterons 1, 2, and 3, and 4. They just got renamed.
Huh.
Yeah, there's only the Mark 5 that's left today, but that's where that comes from. So when you see it and it says in Iteron Mark 5, a lot of us just used to call them 85s. That comes because there were in fact 4 other marks before that, but that got changed also years and years ago. It was probably 8 years ago, 9 years ago, something like that.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I'm chair of classes, and I did that until about 2019 or so, 2020, and I started to find myself. Let's let me see if I can phrase this. I found myself being given extra space roles that didn't really allow me to continue as chair of classes. Now, Robbie had
So
space retired.
so you found yourself being competent?
Yeah, I was. That's a whole other story there. Robbie had retired at this point in time, and Gooniversity was taken over by a guy that we used to just call XY. And his name literally had about 10 letters, and it was all X's and Y's and Z's. People used to call him Ziggy. I used to just call him XY. And he was famous or notorious, depending on your perspective, of somebody asking a question in game, and boom, XY had a link. And I asked him one day, I'm like, how the hell do you do that so fast? And it turned out that he had just opened the in-game notepad, which still exists. Nobody ever uses it, but it still exists. And he just linked a whole bunch of forum links to there. And whenever he was online, he had that open, and he would just drag them into a chat channel. So he could do it in 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah.
I confronted him at Eve Vegas one year. I'm like, how the hell are you doing that so quickly? And that's when he let it spill that he was doing it that way. He became dean of Gooniversity. So he was director of Gooniversity for, I'm trying to remember when Robbie retired. I think he was 2020 and 21, because I saw XY at Eve Vegas after COVID. It was after all the COVID stuff. So and XY was there, so I got to meet him. Then XY stepped down. He had some big real life things happen. We had Ankh take over for a couple of years, did a lot of the revamping on the classes that I mentioned earlier, where all of those names and numbers got changed. All of that was done about 18 months or so ago.
Yep.
Ankh stepped down earlier this year, and I was looking around and decided that it's a lot for what Gooniversity does now, of the handouts, all of the classes, doing all of these kind of pieces, that one person, it just tends to burn them out. We've been
Yeah.
when we first started, like our first director lasted about 5 years. I think Robbie was dean of university for about 5 years. XY lasted about 2.5 or 3. Yeah,
Yeah.
two, 2 or 3. Ankh lasted about 2. It's like, okay, we seem to be going down in our number before we're burning people out. And so rather than throw one person under that bus, I threw two. And so Gooniversity today has co-directors, which is Aoife and Callie.
Yes, and I I love their balance and personality is absolutely fantastic, and I it's like, oh, you see a decline, like there's a problem. How can that problem be fixed? And I think that that was actually an ingenious solution. Just from personal experience on it, shall we say?
Yeah,
Um,
it's been an interesting change. I've seen the org being created. I it's hard to say, if I was one of the OG members of it because it's been so long ago. Like I was in the Big B's program. I was a Big B. And I honestly don't remember when University was founded because it didn't seem like anything changed. It was a very subtle evolution of, oh yeah, we're gonna do this piece, we're gonna add these classes. Um, I do remember when Ted just it literally grabbed me and said, "Oh, you think that's a problem, do you?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." So Fuyan and he was the guy who ran the original 102 class with me. He and I did that. We actually did a scrap heap challenge, which became the 102 class where we would anchor cans around and we put ammo in one can and we put afterburners in another and we put shield mods in another and guns in another and empty hulls. And I think we put a carrier in the very middle so people could refit off of it and fly out in a pod. And it was grab a hull and then you had to fit it. These were unfitted hulls. You had to fly up to a can. And I think we labeled each can like ammo, guns, shields,
yeah.
whatever it was. Um, and that ridiculous scrap heap challenge that we came up with, which I shouldn't say we, that was Fuyan's idea. I think he was watching one of those like not storage wars, but one of those ridiculous things where like they used to run them on TV all the time, where they would have to build something. It was a British show, um,
Yep.
and it was the most ridiculous thing. They'd get like 2 days to build something, and it had to like complete some objective. I swear he was watching that and said we should do that in Eve Scrap Heap Challenge. Um,
Yeah.
but that's funny. That's what we called our version of it. Did he literally steal that? He might have. He totally could have
It
ripped that
sounds
name
like
off
you
of the
did.
British, but that's what we call it. We call it the Scrap Heap Challenge. Yeah, I used to watch it too. It was hilarious. Um,
I say it reminds me of those British baking shows where it's you have like 30 seconds to grab an ingredient and make it work. And but again,
yeah,
that's
that's
food
basically what
related.
this was, just with Eve ships. Yeah, um, and that Fuyin and I were talking on comms, and that's where I don't know how Ted found out about this, unless he was on that fleet on an alt or something. But we were doing that class, that scrap heap, and that became the 102 class. It trying to remember how many of those scrap heaps we did. A couple of them,
I
two or
don't
three of
know.
them, something like that. And then we transitioned into doing the 102 class. Fuyan didn't know anything about probing, combat probing. Oh, Junkyard Wars. Yeah, Moon, that was it. Junkyard Wars. Yeah, yeah. Um, it's the most ridiculous and stupid um, show you've ever seen, but it was a lot of fun. Uh, but Fuyan didn't understand like combat probing mechanics. Uh, and I did. I used to live in wormhole space. I did it for years when wormholes first came out in. They came out in '08, as I recall. I started playing in '09, so they were still brand new. Nobody knew anything. It was very much you could go in and actually enjoy wormhole space. People weren't like constantly hunting you and would shoot you in 10 seconds, which is the way it is now. But back at that point in time, they were still very new. They'd been out for a year or so. So I created the 103 class because he didn't know how to use combat probes. And for those who have started subsequently, at this point in time, you had to position each probe individually. You had to
Mm-hmm.
manually move them all. The formations that are used today didn't exist then, uh, and it was a pain. Um, so I was saying Apocrypha was in '09. Yeah, I think it was like January of '09 when they introduced wormhole space, if I recall correctly. Uh, it's been so many years that I forget some of these dates. Um, March, okay, close enough. So they've been out 6 months or so. When I started, I joined in October, September, something like that of '09. So yeah, about 6 months they existed. Um,
But man, that's
yeah, so the
insane.
yeah wormholes were they were very interesting. They were kind of a lead
Mm-hmm.
up to incursions, was kind of the next
Yeah.
um, big one. Um, Mag sites, radar, etc. So those sites, so Moon, those did exist, but they were also the names of the uh, ECM systems and the sensor systems, and so you would kind of match them up with it. Something that it doesn't really work today because of the changes to ECM. But what you could do back in the days, if you wanted to know what kind of jammer to use against a ship, you would look at the color of the icon on the ship. If it was red, you'd use a specific jammer for that. If it was blue, you'd use. Fortunately, there were two blues. There was a lighter blue and a darker blue. One was Keldari, one was Galenti. Um, the kind of gold one was Amar, and the red one was Minmatar. And you could actually match them up because the color of the module matched the type that you would jam it with. When CZP redid the isotope icon just here recently, those colors match the old colors to the sensor systems. If you go and look at them, they really did track that. Um, it could be Moon that radar was data sites and mag sites were or. I honestly don't remember that from that many years ago.
It's a nice
They
little
they could very well have.
it's a nice little flashback that they match the colors up to the older colors and having that kind of tie in. And they did add the ECM colors kind of back as well, at least a little bit more vibrantly, I think.
They did, but as Simos points out, the ship background actually was the color that you would match it to.
Oh.
And they've done some changes to those icons. So you would look at a ship hull, and if you would look at a Caldari ship, all of their backgrounds, regardless of the icon, all of the backgrounds were the same color as the jammers used against them, and that's how you could do it. You would match those colors. So it was super easy once you got used to it. If you at the very beginning you weren't really up to speed on how jamming worked, you could do it that way. You would just match the colors.
See, that is awesome. That makes more sense. I'm sad they got rid of that.
Yeah, one that they really did it really killed one of my favorite classes that I used to do. I would do one on damage mitigation, which would be, how you approach a target. This was
Mm-hmm.
for the tackle class that we used to do. It was a D scan / tackle class,
Wait, goons
and
can
we would do
tackle?
things like, yeah, I used to teach a class on this on how to do it. Uh, and it was if you hit approach, right, you go straight at them. Well, that's a terrible idea if you're going against a turret ship because it minimizes your transversal. Well, back in the day, they had, um, if you did a show info on the turret, it would show velocity. Sorry, radial velocity for it. That was how fast the ship could turn in radians. And then all you had to do was alter your overview and put in I want to see by radial velocity. And if your radial velocity was higher than the turret's radian turning rate, they couldn't hit you. Didn't matter what the range was. You would move too fast for them to be able to hit you.
And that's where you would
But
probably
CC,
use the spiral approach, where CCP
yep,
actually
you
put out
would.
pictures of how to. They actually, and I only remember this because it came from a tweet, and I never go on what used to be Twitter, but they put out a tweet about it showing the circular approach that you can do to help with avoiding damage and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and that's what that's for. So back in the day, you had to do that manually. The orbit command actually would take you straight in until you got to, I think it was 10,000 meters, something like that, and then it would turn your ship into
Mm-hmm.
the orbit, but it would bring you straight in at it. So what we used to do with that class is we would show everybody, okay, this is how you manually approach a target to keep your transversal up. Well, a few years ago, I shouldn't say that's 7 years ago or something, CCP changed the display calculation, so it doesn't show the radian turn rate of turrets anymore. It's just this weird random number, and that
Mm-hmm.
number doesn't correspond to your radial velocity. They changed the way that that number is displayed, and so that class became useless because you couldn't teach anybody. You can still do angles, how to approach with it, and those values still work. The optimal approach angle is technically 45 degrees to maximize that. It's still close on the target. 30 degrees works too, but 45 is technically one of the best. But it just doesn't line up because you can't show the student or the person who's taking this like, oh well, you see, if this number on your ship is higher than this number on the turret, they cannot hit you. And you
Mm-hmm.
just can't do that anymore. The number on the turrets don't correspond to radial velocities anymore.
Yeah, as somebody who's a visual person, like
Uh,
I'd love to see that.
yeah, Sibyl, you're totally right on that. I've been doing this now, um, 16 years. It'll be 16 years this fall. So yeah, everything is a few years ago, and you've been doing it this long. That's fair. Uh, I do believe that changed because I used to run that class when I was chair of classes. So they made that change in 2017, 2018, 2019, something like that. Because I remember when it happened, it pissed me off. It's like, all right, that class is kind of screwed now. So we got rid of that. We used to do one. We did that same class. I fitted up a Typhoon, a battleship with turrets and missiles, and so I had different sized turrets and different sized missile launchers, and I would fire missiles and turrets actually at the class. We did this as live fire. Um, I never killed anybody with that one. I did on the bombing class, but I never actually killed anybody with that class. But then, yeah, another one of the classes that I did, the only ships I ever FC were bombers because I love bombers, and so I did a class on. It was the advanced class that we would do on using stealth bombers, and we would put a target out, and we would actually have the students bomb. Again, I used a battleship, and I would have a festival launcher on it, and we would shoot fireworks at them. So if the firework got launched, then you're dead. Is how we would do that class, and so I would have them spec tank the or I spec tanked the battleship so that 10 bombs coming in would not actually kill it. Uh, I think I used a Typhoon for that as well. I might have used a Armageddon. I don't remember which one it was, but we would shoot fireworks at them to show them that they were uncloaked too long.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually had somebody hit their MWD instead of warping off, and they flew right into the bomb path and died.
I
Which,
was about to
if you fly
ask.
bombers, happens.
I was about to ask, how do you kill somebody with fireworks? No, somebody just wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, yeah, it's because to kill a stealth bomber is actually really, really easy. Doesn't
Yeah.
take a whole lot of damage. They're glass cannons. When you're firing bombs, and most of the time we usually used electron bombs because we were usually flying either purifiers or hounds with those kind of things, and it didn't matter what hull you were flying. We always used the same type of bomb, and we would spec tank the ship against it, uh, and we would try and tell everybody, okay, we're we're going to use electron bombs today, so everybody needs to be in this hull. Yep,
Yeah.
you could use cruise missiles on them too for a while. Yep, they're the torpedoes now, but you actually could use cruise missiles on them, and so they could fire to stupid range with those cruise missiles. You're not really going to pop a frigate with cruise missiles. Their blast radius is too big for that, but they'll mess up cruisers and above. Battleships especially vulnerable to cruise missile fire.
Yeah, that is OP. That they used to be able to. They would pop. Oh, they had a bonus. They would pop frigs. They could pop frigs,
Yeah,
maybe.
you could. Yeah, it's one of those things of the. It's amazing how many things you could. Yeah, you could be cloaked again. Yep, the uh, reset timer on the cloaks had changed. It was something I actually tested one night with a class. We were doing bombings. We were firing bombs. So this reminds me, we were firing bombs and we were seeing it. It's like, okay, warp off. And the class, like a number of people were not getting damage notifications. They're like, did my bomb hit? I'm like, yes. I'm looking at the damage notification. I pulled up the in-game damage log. I'm like, I can see the damage notification from your ship. And I sat down with, I think it was 3 or 4 of the guys at the end of the class. I'm like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Refill your bomb launcher. We're going to test this. And what we found out is that this was before the grid size was changed. The grids were much, much smaller back then. If they left the grid before the bomb detonated, they did not get on the kill notification, right? The damage notification did not show up for them, but it did for me. But it turned out it was if they were on grid or not when the bomb detonated. And so I had people just aligned to me at an extremely low velocity and had them fire the bomb and just stop. And if they were on grid, they would get a damage notification. If they had left grid before, just for whatever their warp out point was, however it worked, they would not. But it was very, very random. I sent in a bug report to CCP, but as far as I know, they never fixed that. I doubt they cared. Because it would, like if somebody posted the kill mail, you would still see that then that you got on it because they posted the kill mail or whoever else did. Yeah, the grid size is somebody else is talking about right here. At this point in time, an absurdly large grid might be 200 or 300 kilometers across. Those were big grids back then. Grids today run 1,000 kilometers easily. That's a small grid. And so if you crossed a grid line, you could not see someone, didn't matter how far away they were, you couldn't actually see them. This used to happen every now and then in 1DQ, where you could not see from the Imperial Palace to the T5Z gate. That's what they all used to look like when you would cross those grid lines.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they could put a bubble on one side of a grid line and its effect would go over your side, but you couldn't see the bubble, and then they just bomb the shit out of you.
Damn, that's I don't want to say that's extremely clever and good use of grids and knowing where that grid line is. But
yeah, it used to be called grid foo, is how you would alter grid sizes, and there were techniques to do it. It hasn't really been a thing. They changed the grid sizes when citadels were introduced to make them bigger. Oh, we've seen the grid break in ULX. I have not seen it break in ULX yet. It used to break in 1DQ on a pretty regular basis. I haven't seen it in ULX.
before we formally moved up in our new space, I saw quite a few grid breaks, and I'm just like, okay, this is fun. This works.
Yeah, it used to happen a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, it used to really happen a lot there. But yeah, so these classes, these mechanics that we're talking about, that's why I created these classes, was to talk about these mechanics, to show them to people. And it's the kind of main focus of Gooniversity today is they've got the handouts, sure. But Gooniversity really began as a teaching group. It evolved, as I mentioned, from that peer-to-peer mentoring into a teaching group. So the classes are the big drawing point to it today of getting in and showing someone a new mechanic, right? We have people come back from Eve all the time. They've taken a break. They're gone for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. I saw a guy in the other day. I don't remember what channel it was, saying that they had come back after a 10-year absence. Like, oh my god, man! This At that point, I tell him like flat out, dude, you are not playing the game you remember. You are
Yeah.
Forget everything you think you know. Like every mechanic has changed because 10 years ago there were no faxes. They didn't exist back then. Uh, jump fatigue didn't exist back then, right? Those are all changed in those pieces. Citadels were not a thing. Outposts still existed back then, which were non-conquerable. You could conquer them and change ownership, but you couldn't destroy them. Once they were in place, they were there permanently. They became the faction Fortizars. If y'all remember in 1DQ where we had the Dyson sphere of faction Fortizars,
Mm-hmm.
those were the old outposts, which were kind of like a Fortizar in in effect, because you could not dock supers or titans with them. So they weren't like at a keepstar level; they were more like Fortizars. And so when they converted them to the Fortizars, they'd actually a lot of us are kind of like, seriously, you're not going to give us keepstars for all these things?
Yeah.
But you couldn't dock supers and titans with them, and Fortizars still can. Uh,
And
yep,
we
there
may
were
not
4 stations.
have the grid of those anymore, but there was one that was put down the other night this weekend. So, in our space. So, um, I've
Yeah, they
seen
had.
pictures of it looking like a lightsaber, and I'm just like, oh dear lord.
That's the old office station. Yeah, so the four, as somebody else says, that's the old office station. So each one had a specific uh, role, one for each of the races. So there was a Kaldari one, there was a Galenti one, there was a Minmatar one, and there was an Amar one. The Galenti one um, is the office one
Mm-hmm.
that he's talking about there, and it had a whole bunch of office slots in it for a corpse to rent an office. The Minmatar one was the refining station. It had a refinery in it. The Amar one was the production one, had the building pieces to it, and the Kaldari one was the research station. Um,
Okay.
and the best one to light sinos on by far was the Galanti one because the collision model on it was so small you could actually, because it was very vertically tall, you
Yep.
could light it almost anywhere and be within docking range.
That's
The absolute
the
worst one was the Amara station.
one
Yeah, the
that
production
looks
one.
like it basically looks like a ball at the bottom and it has a straight through it. I'm not
Yeah, the
remembering
office
what
one
it's
does.
specifically called, but
Yeah.
yeah, the office one. Absolutely, I love seeing those. I'm planning
As
on
the
getting my own pictures on the new one, just to have some
Yeah, the
fun.
Caldari one, the research one was pretty good. It had a big open space in the middle of it.
Ooh.
Um, the Minmatar, the refining one, was okay. It wasn't too bad. The Amar one was just terrible because of the how close you had to get
Mm,
the sinos to them. It was difficult to sino in on one of those.
that makes
Again, the
sense.
easiest one by far was the office. Yeah, absolutely. We
Yeah.
always used to do that. If you had an office one, you're just like, all right, well, this sino's gonna be nothing. But this is when you could put sinos on noob ships too. You could put a sino on anything. So noob ship sinos were super common at that point in time.
Man, I wish they would bring
We
that
actually used to
back.
do. Yeah, we actually used to do a class on how to train new recon people to do sinos. But since there was no jump fatigue, most
Oh,
people at that point had their own sino alts, and they would move their own carriers and dreads and everything around. So it wasn't until later, basically until after the casino war and we were living in Delve, that training recons into how to actually light sinos became more of a thing because fewer people were used to doing it with fatigue, because it was, and again, they had changed them to being on recon ships, so you couldn't use noob signals anymore. And so it was just one of those things of, it's like, okay, there were guides all over on how to do it.
Awesome. So
So we actually used
just
to train people on how to light sinos.
just gonna ask. So fatigue came into play in like 2020. Is that what I'm understanding? Kind of
Oh
in
no,
that
it was before that.
it was before. Okay,
Yeah, no,
I was
it
just
came in
trying to
before that. It was
piece it
during
together.
the Casino War.
Okay, so
So when we
that
lost our
tracks.
space and deck, that's when fatigue was a thing. So
Okay, that
Citadels came
tracks.
in. We lost our space and deck to what we call the Casino War, and we call it that because we are not clever at all. It's just because the people who are attacking us were funded by the old casinos, the old
Yeah.
Eve casinos. That's where they got all the money from. So we call it the Casino War. But fatigue was introduced in that time frame, kind of with Citadel. So
Okay.
they all kind of came in a relatively short period. Uh, the original version, the version of fatigue that we have now, if they had introduced it then, I don't think anybody really would have cared, because it's somewhat controversial. I said this when I did my history class with, I think it was with Kaz, a few months ago.
Hmm.
Fatigue is a good mechanic as we have it now.
Yes.
The original version of fatigue they introduced was terrible. Um, it was unlimited. The first version, there was no limit to the
Oh.
amount of fatigue that you could get, and it was an exponential curve. We actually calculated it out as exponential. It wasn't
Oh
linear. It
no
was actually
no no.
exponential. Somebody actually ended up with like 360 days of fatigue, so they could not jump. They had 360 days of it. Yeah, Citadels was in 2016. Um, they were just coming out with the Citadels during the Casino War. Yeah, so we moved to
That's
Delve in 2017. I think it was spring 2017. So jump fatigue did apply to jump bridges in the first iteration, but it does not apply now. Um,
yes. Now you just pay ISK and
yes,
use the fuel and go through.
yeah. So there's no jump fatigue on jump bridges now, but there was back then. Um, and so you could get pods were actually immune from jump fatigue for a little while. Shuttles became immune to it as well, but pods were immune to it. And so people would sit on jump bridge routes and they would just smart bomb pods left and right because people were taking pods to reduce jump fatigue. And
Oh.
I don't know how many implants got blown away with that, but it was a lot. Um,
I would be
it
curious to
was a huge
see
amount.
a graph seeing how much in implants got smart bombed during this time. If there was a way to find a graph, and this is probably before Z Kill or something along those lines. I don't know.
No, Z-Kill existed then. I
Okay.
don't. Yeah, that would you'd have to really dig into Zekill's been around for a very long time. It was around before I started playing Eve.
So dig
There
in.
were multiple. Yeah, you'd have to really dig through that database. Uh, but yeah, the original jump fatigue, uh, it was terrible. They also nerfed jump range on caps at the same time, so it was this horrible nerf of pieces coming in at once. They did revert the jump fatigue to a certain extent, right? It's capped at 6 hours now. The original one had no cap. CCP fairly rapidly realized that was stupid, and they lowered the cap to 30 days. They then lowered it again. I don't know if it was to 10 days or something. They've incrementally changed it over the years. It was 30 days at one point in time. It's 6 hours now. And
Thank
so,
goodness.
if yeah, if you had introduced this, because the big issue with jump fatigue is the fact that among the null blocks, you could move a capital fleet, super capital fleet, anywhere in Eve in less than an hour. Didn't matter where you were, you could move them because all you needed was the sinos and enough fuel. Um, and you'd have to recharge your capacitor. So as long as you got your capacitor up to the magic line, and we always used to say 75%, just in case there was some weird bug on your on your system. You could jump
Mm-hmm.
just indefinitely for it, and so that used to be a thing. PL was famous or notorious, mostly notorious because everybody hated them for it, for just popping out of nowhere and dropping a super or carrier or dreadnought fleet on people. And you're like, where the hell were you? Like last intel had you, 9 regions away. And sure they were, but you could move an entire fleet like that in 10 minutes
Oh wow.
because jump ranges were much longer than they are today too. So jump
Yeah.
ranges were longer, and then all you had to do is recharge your capacitor and have fuel.
Yeah, so have fuel will travel. Bring something with extra fuel. Like that is deadly, potentially.
Yeah. So symbiotes, yeah, my first set of no, I didn't name mine with numbers. I was not that clever. But I had 5 or 6 Sino alts at that time, and you that would let me move a carrier 4 or 5 regions. I could just do it
Damn.
myself pretty easily. It'd take 5 minutes. Just travel fit your carrier, put a whole bunch of cap rechargers and stuff in it, and you could recharge your cap in 30 seconds.
5 minutes.
Assuming
Dude,
you just didn't dock in a um, outpost. Yep,
that.
Fountain Chain. Yeah, yeah. It was super. Yeah, Symbiotes and I come from the same era of Eve moving cap fleets. Uh, if you try to do 10 jumps now in a carrier, no, it'll take you all weekend.
Yeah, that would be
If they're
a.
max range jumps, it will take hours to do that. And that was CCP's point. That was their goal. That's what they wanted to happen. They wanted to make it so that you couldn't just drop an entire armada of supers and titans on some random dude. If you were going to commit it, you had to actually commit it.
Yeah.
And so when they introduced these mechanics, is when a new group was created, uh, run by Asher, that was called Reavers. And what we would do is we would wait for someone to commit their caps and super somewhere, and then we take wormholes into their background, to their backyard,
Backyard.
and just start torching things. Because it would take, because remember, this is
Yeah.
when fatigue still had the extremely long time frame. So if you
So it took
moved
them
max
forever.
range jumps, you could strand a fleet for about a week. Uh,
Yeah.
and we would jump into their backfield and just torch stuff. We used to set up what we
Yeah.
called a corpse pause, and we thought it was hilarious. It was a pause that we would deploy, and every time we potted them, we would
Put their
pick
bodies.
up their corpse and we would put it on that pause. And as long as you went around and picked them up every, I don't remember what it was, 4 days, something like that, you had to bring them in and then kick them back out again. And you could just do that. And so we would put their corpses inside the shield so they couldn't get them, and we just toss them out. And then you'd go every couple of days and pull them in and toss them out again. Uh, they hated that. We used to do that a lot.
That sounds like fun though. As somebody with a body collection, like okay, I say body collection. I have a container that has bodies of people, and I think the best one that I have right now is Seema's. Um, it just
Sure, sure. Yeah, we used
yeah.
to do that a lot. And we literally called it the corpse pause. Um,
That is
but yeah, that
awesome.
was that was something that we used to do. Frozen popsicle collection. I like that. That's pretty good.
They just
Uh,
stay on ice. They're in space. They'll be fine.
yeah, that was so I was teaching classes at the time to the newbies and collecting corpses for the corpse pause. I was doing both those at the same time.
The symbiotes, you know your collection is serious when you have a shamash. That or a Dagon or a Moloch where you have to have a ship for it, let alone multiple containers. I'm almost to my next container. I'm getting there. Um, but yes, it's I have people that know me that go here. I'm contracting you bodies, and I get sent bodies, and it has slightly become a thing where um, they people just contract me bodies.
Yeah, let's say there's a couple of people who have all those kind of things. Yeah, unique item stack limits, those are a
Mm-hmm.
pain. I've had it with blueprint copies where I actually had to create a alt corp, and then I actually had to create another alt corp because I was hitting the blueprint limit
Item
on the
limits.
industrial window. I didn't even know it was a blueprint limit until that happened. It turns out there is. It's like 25,000 prints, something like that. And when you get over that limit, it won't populate the list for you. So I had to create a second alt corp to move some of the prints over to so that the list would actually populate so I could see it.
Dang, and I was here sitting here thinking, maybe it's an item limit thing, but
So there are item limits as well. Um, it's 1,000 stacks of items. So it's not 1,000 items; it's 1,000 stacks of items. You can't put more than 1,000 in a hanger; it won't let you. What you can do is you can put them into cans, and so you can put multiple cans in a hanger, and each of those cans will have 1,000 items with it. Yeah, BPCs have gotten better. The items itself is still 1,000 because when I fit and refit ships, uh, I hit that limit all the time, and it's just like, oh my god, I've got like 300 hulls to refit,
yep.
and it takes forever because you have to repackage them and reset them and do all this kind of things. It's a massive pain. So the item limit is still 1,000. I'll admit I have not reset that many in maybe about a month or something like that, but I did it 4 or 5 weeks ago, and that item limit was still there. And then you get this really kind of hostile thing that pops up from Eve that basically says, "Stop doing this, idiot." Um,
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh.
but one of the little things that used to pop up that I actually miss from back at this point in time, 10 plus years ago, was Scotty. He was the manager of the hangar. He was literally the hangar manager, and everybody hated Scotty because he was always telling you, "No, you can't do this. You're doing it too fast. I hate you right now." He had all these little phrases, and his name was Scotty, and everybody hated him. Um,
So
it's a good thing he wasn't a real guy. We would like tossed him into the bay and outside of Harpa or something like that.
instead of Aura's voice, it was Scotty.
Well, he didn't say anything, but yeah, Aura came later. Um, Aura was part of the new player experience. They've revamped CTB's revamped the NPE, right? The new player experience probably
Yeah.
10 times. Seems like they do it about every other year. Aura came in. I don't even remember when Aura was created, but it's been years and years. So they existed together at one point in time. Scotty was still around with Aura, but I don't know why they retired Scotty. I hope he got a nice retirement. Somebody else is saying there's this Scotty the docu manager's clone. I don't remember that. I probably have one somewhere.
I'm gonna have to go look for it. I know. I'm just going, man. We need CCP to bring back Scotty and put cat ears on ships and uh, stations and characters, because apparently those are the two, I think, biggest things that I would probably be like, hey, give us this.
Well, back in the day, they had a live events team. That unfortunately that team has been defunct now for quite some time. This is when the original incursions came out. We were talking about wormholes. Incursions came out after that, and they would do events. They would go around and do pieces. The first incursion in HiSec, the very first one, I was there for it. They had set it up. They were doing all these kind of things. I think it was 2 days before anything even occurred because they wanted everybody to know it was there.
Yeah.
These wormholes were brand new. We knew there was something with Sancha, but we didn't know what they were. And so people were sitting there with ECM trying to collapse the wormhole. They were trying to use graviton ECM emitters because of course nerds are thinking, okay, well, gravity should disrupt a wormhole, and so they were using graviton ECM to try and collapse the wormhole in HiSec. Uh, it of course didn't do anything because the wormholes don't have like hit points or something that you can kill.
Yeah.
But people tried that, and then a guy was quitting Eve. I don't remember his name.
Yes,
I
this
believe he was in the
guy.
military, if I'm recalling this story, and he was quitting Eve. Reached out to CCP and said, "Hey, I'm not going to be able to do this anymore at all." And so the very first Sanchez supercarrier ever seen in New Eden is his. He flew out to the wormhole in his pod. Their carrier, the supercarrier, came through. He jumped in it, basically did the, thanks for all the fishes, went back through into, quote unquote, Jove space,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a thing. And, oh, sorry, no, this is Sanchez. Went back to wherever the hell they were based at the time. And that's how he quit Eve. And the live events team put all of that stuff on. So that would have been 2010, 2011, something like that. But that team put all of that together. And that was the very first incursion, the Sanchez incursion. The Drifters incursions came later. This is the Sanchez incursions, the very first ones. But he was leaving, and so they set it up all with him. He came into the system, warped out to it, jumped into the supercarrier, and flew back through the wormhole. And we're all like, "What the hell's going on?" Because of course they didn't tell anybody this was going
Oh
to
yeah,
happen.
of
This was
course
a
not.
surprise to all of us. Uh, we're like, "What is this guy doing?" And he gets into the supercarrier because you couldn't use supercarriers in HiSec. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not like you can now. You've never really been able to. There's
Yeah.
every now and then somebody will get an SRP on a supercarrier and it will end up like in Jita.
Mm-hmm.
And then some GM is like, oh crap, that was the wrong button. And they move it to some low sec system.
Yeah.
But you could actually build carriers and dreadnoughts in HiSec way back in the day. It's where the Veldot came from, that was famous for being one of the only dreadnoughts in, as a revelation, one of the only dreadnoughts in HiSec, and it was owned by a guy named Kriba, um, who fitted with, I kid you not, mining lasers, and he would go out and mine Veldspar in HiSec with it,
That is awesome.
um, and it became known as the Veldknot for it. Kriba is an interesting guy. He was one of the handful of incredibly trusted people who would broker super capital sales back in the day, because there were no keep stars. You couldn't dock them. And so
Oh.
you had to trust whoever it was who was going to buy your super carrier, or Titan, same thing,
Yeah.
because you had to fly it out of a pause shield. They were built in pauses. They used CSAAs, capital ship assembly arrays, and jump out of it. They had to jump in it and then hope
They
that
paid you.
they paid you, and then hope that the other person didn't just shoot you once you were in there for it. So Kriba was, as Symbiote says, one of the third-party brokers. So he would hold the ISK. He would be in system usually
Mm-hmm.
for it. I've seen interviews with him. I never dealt with him personally, but I've seen interviews where he's talking about it. He would be in system, and he would watch the person like fly up to it. They would send him the ISK. He would confirm to the person with the super, yes, I have your ISK. They would jump out. The guy would jump in. He would, you know, literally jump away. They couldn't take Stargates. Then you have to use a sign on and move them. And then Kriba would transfer the ISK to the original the builder. Um, I've done third-party brokering stuff myself. A few of us have. Some of the finance team does. We'll mostly with war bonds, and peace bonds and everything like that. So the Gamma, Sigma, and Theta bonds, to where somebody's wants to sell them but doesn't know the other person, and I act like a broker, just like Crip has done, where it's like, yep, send me the shares, you send me the money, and then I switch them. Okay, this person gets the money, this person gets the shares. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, Kriba, unfortunately, as far as I know, he has one Eve. I haven't heard his name in quite some time.
Man, it's
He was a. I'm trying to remember if he was an Aussie or if he was just at Eve Down Under. The last interview I saw with him, but he actually had Veldspar tattooed on his arm.
that's kind of awesome. Yet, I mean, although I shouldn't speak, I am the person who. But once I would settle into my favorite chip, I could see myself getting a tattoo of the outline. So, I have no judgment on the Veldspar tattoo. Um,
No, it's literally just the word Veldspar. Yeah, it's just
just
the word Veldspar.
oh gosh.
Yeah, it
Well,
wasn't. It wasn't the picture of the ship. It was just the word Veldspar. Um,
hmm,
yeah, that was
that's
the last interview I saw with him. It was Eve Down Under, but I think it was probably 2017 or 2018. It was before uh, Vietnam, for sure. It was before Vietnam because it was before COVID and all the lockdowns and everything like that. It was
yeah,
an Eve Down Under before that.
yeah. Man.
Oh, so I went through your question list there as we were talking. I think
Yeah.
the final question that I got that we've talked about is kind of where did Gooniversity get its name? And
Yeah.
that one, I honestly don't know where that name officially came from. Like, who came up with that
Okay.
name itself? Um, as I said, the original three people to it is World Chatter, Pork Butt, and Ted. Those were the three original people who were doing that. Um, Pork Butt was from Karma Fleet. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it shouldn't say was. Well, I mean, he's not really playing anymore, but he came over with Karma Fleet. Um, and then World Chatter and Ted. And so I don't know where they came up with that, but it fits to the idea, right, of a training teaching group because it's a university. That's what universities do. So I don't know the actual history of that specific name for it. Uh, but the original one was called Little/Big Bees. And so I'm sure they were like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we're changing this from a mentoring system, which is what that was, to a more
Class.
formal teaching piece with classes. Oh,
And
Cribba still runs Eve files. Interesting.
hmm, but either
Maybe he's
way,
still active. I have not heard his name in forever.
either way, I do agree. I think the name is very fitting for a group of knowledgeable people who go and teach classes and have people who have more knowledge and people who need some of that knowledge kind of congregate as one does at a college area, for lack of better words. Um, Congregation in the form of in the spirit of learning. I definitely think that it's a good name. I hope it stays as such. And my
Yeah, I mean,
experience
I
in
I have no
historiography.
real desire to change it. So it's one of those things of given my position within the alliance, uh, there's only one person who really can tell me to change something, and I actually have to listen to him. Um, but he's away on vacation right now, so I get to do whatever I want. So
He is touching grass or kissing grass and touching I don't know. I think I've got it backwards, but he's off having a good
with
time.
him, it's hard to say, to be fair. Uh,
I don't know. I do know that his tolerance of spicy food is
it's
is a
zero.
thing. Is a zero. Yeah.
It is a negative, is what it is. He's out collecting
Kirkland
Kirkland
bars.
bars, right?
I'll say
Uh,
maybe he's
to be honest, no joke, man. He actually sent me. Well, he sent a couple of us in the command team a picture, so that we knew he was all right and everything like that. And he had been to uh, try and get some Costco stuff in another country. We're like, you're the biggest fucking nerd, dude. What are you doing? Why are you doing that in another country? Um,
well. Hey, at
and
least
I
he
don't know
still
if
has
he
access to Costco.
Yeah, I'm not entirely convinced that there is one. I need to actually look it up with that country and see if that's a thing, or if he's just ribbing us because we knew that it would fit him to a T. Um, I think I will check and see if they actually are in this country. I don't think they are. I think he was just giving us a hard time, but we all believed it.
I mean, given the propensity for Costco's and the Costco conversations that seem to have with the Alliance's favorite parasocial relationship, I definitely think he might have gone to at least get something from Costco, be it spaghetti sauce, be it, you know, it could be anything. He could go and probably get lost in there in another country and have a good time. So I'm glad that he seems to be alive. You may want to check on the Costco though, but I'm glad
I
that
looked it
he's
up.
getting a
They actually
laugh.
do exist in that country.
Oh, they
Yeah,
do.
I just checked. Yeah. Um, so he might have actually gone to one. Being I have to check
Oh
with him when
my
he gets back. It's
gosh.
like, did your U.S. membership work there? Because that I can't imagine would. But
I mean, I
actually,
could. It's
there are some in that
Costco.
country. So
It's
yeah.
it's a business. If they're gonna give you a membership, they gotta honor all of the country's memberships. Like that'd be my thinking, and my thing would be, okay, hold on, what cool chocolate or what cool non-American items do they have here that I can get and shove in a suitcase?
Oh, so UK memberships work in the States? Yeah.
So
Uh,
yeah.
and somebody has been hiding there, and I didn't even know he was there. There's one of your university directors.
Ify snuck in. Aoife snuck in. I call him Ify sometimes,
Yeah.
but it's Aoife. Or occasionally, apparently, he goes by Arnold. Um, if yes, I read that, Aoife. I read it. Have I told newbies to tell you call you Arnold? Yes, because you said the meme. But as somebody who
That's
goes,
fine.
none of my thing doesn't get read. I read it. I pay attention. I see your memes. But with with that and my slight poking of Aoife, the cat wrangler, or the wrangler of with cat ears, either one. Um, Ranger, thank you
Well,
for your time as well.
I'll say sure the original cat wrangle that I always uh, talk about is Bruden. You know,
Ooh.
he's he was a member of the currently he was a instructor within Gooniversity when I was chair of classes. He moved over to be really big in KFU, the high sec
Okay.
version. He unfortunately had some real life stuff, so he's not really even it up anymore. Uh, but he was so when people in GSF talk about being pancake catted, that's Bruden. He is the one
Oh,
who would do that, and so he became. Uh, and he's actually gotten me a couple of times. I think on the fireside, like I was not this last weekend, but like I've been on the fireside and been doing
mm-hmm.
something, and uh, he's put a link in there, and I just wasn't paying attention. It came from him. Um, and you get Rick rolled. Well, when you get pancake cat, that's Bruden. He's the one who started that thing. He used to do that constantly to people,
See,
and he was damn good at it too. He would edit the URLs and redirect them. And it's just like, oh, you bastard.
that's smart.
So yeah, Bruden used to do that a lot.
That's very smart. See, I have a I do Rickroll, but there is both the Pancake Cat and there is also the Asher Pancake Cat. Um, I have been known to occasionally get people with an Asher Pancake Cat just to you know go into the madness, and it's not as bad as when I have actually Rickrolled a certain Alliance CD director in local because I was trying to get the
Yeah, I
Panhorde
was
guys,
sitting
and
I was sitting yesterday doing the fireside, and Heidi put a link in Jabber, and I told him I was like, I'm not clicking that
I
link.
saw
I,
that.
I don't know what that is, but I'm not clicking that. And he said, "What? Don't you trust me?" I was like, "No, I've known you for years.
No.
I don't trust you for a second." And then somebody else chimed in, is like, "Oh yeah, it's not, whatever I accused him of. I think I accused him of being Rickroll, but what it's like, oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
okay." I'm like I trust you. He knows everybody. Don't remember who that was that I just threw casually underneath that bus, but that's okay.
It's all right. They'll live. They'll live. It'll be okay. I as well do not know who you threw under the bus, but um, oh my gosh, with I love it. That is probably the funniest thing that I've heard, and I love that that's connected in a sense to Gooniversity and everything as kind of a last little meme that we touch on, in the fact that that used to be somebody's, I don't want to say calling card or shared culture, but Pancake Cat. It's a thing.
Yeah, that was Bruden's calling card for years when he was an instructor. Less so when he was working for me as an instructor. I brought him in. I don't remember when, but as one of my instructors there. And then he moved over to KFU, and I had wanted to do that with him. So that was under Merck's operational control at the time. Bruden really took it over. But I had wanted to move over and do a lot of it. And I had a couple of KFU alts. This was right at the beginning of COVID as well. And I had the most grandest of plans because I had stepped down as chair of classes. Then I think I was vice chair. I was just around to be able to help. XY was dean. Rat Knight was actually chair of classes. He and I just switched titles. He was my vice chair and I was chair, and then we just flipped while I was, getting him up to speed to do everything. And I'd wanted to do that, and then Asher kind of came in and threw a big old monkey wrench in the plan of actually doing stuff with KFU when I was elevated to the directorate. And so at that point now, it's been almost 5 years that I don't really teach classes anymore. I do the histories that I do, but that's really it because I just have kind of run out of time, and it's pretty much all Asher's fault. So we'll do that.
Now,
He's not here, so
I mean, you can throw the boss and an unknown Kirkland Costco relation under the bus. That's okay. I understand. I don't know. I'm glad. I really hope you made sure that his Costco rights are good.
I'll
But
have to ask him that. Yeah.
but make sure he's okay, because you got to make sure that he got into the Costco with the actual membership card, because just make sure that he gets his Costco.
Well, he was showing us his dinner. He was cooking with it. So either he's got it or whoever he's there visiting has one. I don't know. He was showing us the dinner, and he's like, from there.
With as much as he talks about Costco, if he doesn't have one, you could probably crowdsource from goons to get him one for a year.
Oh, he absolutely has one here in the U.S. for sure. Yeah.
Good.
I know he does.
Yeah.
I just don't know that his Florida Costco membership is good in the country that he's in. So
That's fair. But yeah, thank you so much for coming and talking and hanging out and giving background on I don't want to say it's an institution in Goons, because it's not. I don't feel like it's been around
it
for
really
100
is,
years,
though.
but it is, in the fact that when you get new Goons,
Yeah, I mean
this is where they step.
It goes back 10 years, and our org our group is much older than 10 years. That's true. I mean, it's closer to 20 years now for Goon Swarm itself.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you get something as somebody else mentioned earlier, it's like when you when you start going, oh yeah, this was a few years ago, and it turns out it was 10, and you're like, oh damn, I'm old in this game.
Well,
I actually said that Zintage accused me of that one of these I was doing. I'm like, oh yeah, that wasn't all that long ago. He's like, dude, it was 2017. I'm like, shut up, Zintage. So
well,
there's a recording of that.
oh gosh,
I sent you the link, Rose. I don't remember which one of the histories it's in, but it's in one
Mhm.
of them, and you'll hear Zintage say is like, relatively speaking, it's like, oh, shut up, Zintage. So,
Oh gosh. I know. Oh, not. Crap! It just flew out of my head. Ugh. I don't know. My brain was. I was trying to hold on to the thought, but it decided to just fly out my ear.
just flitter away.
It
Yeah,
it
I hate it
just
when that happens.
yeah. I my brain is packed. So, but yeah, thank you for taking the time and coming and chatting and yeah, this is very much a good start. The vintage history one was 8 months ago, according to Aoife. So
So it was. If I don't think that's the one where I told Zintage to shut up. I think it was an earlier one. Um, I did. I was talking on one of them at the very end. We were talking fits. And Apple Pear actually threw Zintage under that bus. He's like, just get Zintage on here to do this. And so I just grabbed Zintage for the next one. I'm like, all right, Apple's volunteered you, so you're coming with me on this. And Zintage's like, oh, okay. It's before he was on the CSM.
yeah.
It's kind of in the run up to that, so he wasn't terribly like bitter, or anything like that. And then so I did one with Zintage. I've done one with Shingli on CD, and I did one
Oh.
with Kaz, because Kaz was in leadership when I first joined. Right, Kaz took
Mm-hmm.
about a 5-year break over most of when I was chair of classes and moving into the directorate. Kaz had stepped away, so he was in the leadership before that. So he knew he's got a better view of that history because he was in there, like when Karma Fleet first joined, was doing all that kind of stuff. He was in the leadership team during the lead up to all of those pieces.
And I think symbiote's the final question. But have you had apple pear barbecue? I don't know what this
Um,
means.
I get what you're saying on that, and to be honest, I have not. I'm not a barbecue kind of a guy. I just
This is
like
fair.
to look at apple pear and call him the confused fruit, and
the
that gets him
confused
sometimes.
the confused fruit basket.
Yeah, I've done that on like firesides and stuff like that before. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but so I made a Sino alt during Vietnam just to piss off Apple Pear. I made one and I used it every time I knew he was flying. He was FCing the fleet, and I would put my alt into that fleet as the Sino just to make him say it, because he would sit there and I could hear him on the command comms just going, "God damn it, Ranger," and then he would have to say it, and yeah, it's the little things when you get to needle one of the FCs.
Oh, I know this. I know this. Or anytime you can get them to kind of laugh and break composure just a little bit, because I'm it's always just a reminder that this is a game. Yes, there's a lot of weight and significance in the actions that and stuff that's going on, but we're all still friends in spaceships having fun. And the little jokes and name pranks that we can do just to make it people laugh is definitely something I would say is important in the game.
I think I would leave you with this last one.
Yeah.
We were moving a cap and super fleet around. I was running. I was in recon at the time. I was running one of the Sinos, and I had one of my Sinos on the McMahon Fist Keep Star. So we were in 1DQ. One of my Sinos on the McMahon Fist Keep Star, and I had one on the old Theta Star that was out near the old iHelp grid. And we were moving supers to one, and we are moving caps to the other. I'm sitting on the fleet, and I'm in the command, and I've got both Sinos, and they're like, "Okay, we're ready for the fleet." I was going to go to the Theta Star. I'm like, okay, it's ready. Standing
Mm-hmm.
by. It's all good. I lit it. AFC gave the order to jump. And that's when I realized I was on the wrong screen. And I signed out our entire capital fleet to the wrong place. It was a super cap fleet too.
Oh
Um,
no.
there was a pause on the command comms, and I was like, shit. Uh, we're on the wrong Keepstar. We're in the right system, but we're on the wrong Keepstar. So we had to warp our entire super fleet across 1DQ. Um,
That's a
and I
wide
don't,
system too.
yeah, I don't remember how many of you all remember that distance between the Theta Star and the McMahon-Fisk Keepstar, uh, but it was a lot for supers to warp across. Uh,
Isn't that total system like
so that
a
was
hun-
fun.
that total system's like 121 AU or something, if I remember right?
Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah, it was about
Yeah.
100 AU if I remember those distances right.
Ooh.
Um, so yeah, we had to, and of course everybody on the fleet, because I was dealing with the supers. Um, they were ready to go home and they were waiting for it. So as soon as I said Sino's up and he gave the order to jump, about 100 of them appeared in the wrong place. Uh, and it was my fault. I was just using. I had too many alts online, too many of them in the same system, in different places, and I just hadn't realized I had clicked onto the wrong one, because you would think, okay, well, this grid has two keep stars on it. That grid has one. That's true, but you could see all three of them no matter where you are in the system. So I had to look at the ranges, to see which one it was, and so I signed them into the McMahon-Fisk keep star.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it happens, and
Hey, it was the correct cynotype. It was just the wrong spatial loci. Loci.
I mean, at least it was the right system, just wrong location in the system.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the end of a really long fleet, so everybody was just like, "All right, whatever."
They were
I think
just
we'd
ready
been
to go
out. We'd
home.
been out hours and hours. Yeah, they were just like, "Okay." It was like, "All right, let's check the other grid. Are there any bubbles on the other grid?" It's like, "No." It's like, "Okay, everybody just hit dock, and bubbles won't stop you once you've initiated the warp sequence. It's like just hit dock, and then you can go to bed."
Oh
But yeah, that
God.
was a night. Well, thank you for doing this, Rose, and you guys have a good night. It's been having fun talking to you guys and sharing some of the stories, reading the pieces in there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I really thank you for coming, and thank you for taking the time, and honestly I don't think I've laughed this much um and had such a just like seeing pieces being put and worked together. This is kind of my favorite part of the project is watching you going, okay, I see how this individual puzzle piece fits here and makes everything like it makes the bigger picture just mean so much more. So I really appreciate the time, Ranger, Mr. Uncle Gamma, and yeah.
yeah, of course. You guys have a good night.